Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. We're going to talk to our friend Roger Kimball in a moment, and we want him to focus his attention on the critically important issues facing America in the same way that our betters in the D.C. Press Corps, our intellectual superiors in the D.C. Press Corps, are focusing in on them. And so, of course, we'll start at the top with the most important issue, and that is whether or not President Trump should pardon Joe Exotic, the Tiger King.
One of the biggest rating hits of the coronavirus, aside from these briefings, has been a show on Netflix called Tiger King.
Yeah.
And the man who's the star of this is a former zoo owner who's serving a 22-year prison sentence. He's asking you for a pardon, saying he was unfairly convicted. Your son yesterday jokingly said that he was going to advocate for it, and I was wondering if you've seen the show and if you have any thoughts on pardoning Joe Exotic.
Which son? It must be Don.
It was.
I had a feeling it was Don. Is that what he said? I don't know. I know nothing about it. He has 22 years for what? What did he do?
He allegedly hired someone to murder an animal rights activist, but he said
Spoiler
that
alert.
he didn't do that. And he was.
You think he didn't do it? Are you on his side?
Well,
Are
I'm a reporter. I
you
shouldn't take
recommending a
sides.
pardon?
No, I'm not advocating anything.
As a reporter, you're not allowed to do that. You'd be criticized by these. Would you recommend a pardon?
I'm not weighing in on Tiger
I
King.
don't think you would. I don't think you would. Go ahead. You have a question?
Like Joe Exotic.
I'll take a look. Is that Joe Exotic? That's Joe Exotic.
Dan, I just am 2 episodes in. I knew he was in prison, but I didn't know what for.
Well, now you know.
So thank you.
Don't thank me. Thank New York Post reporter Stephen Nelson. I mean, reporter. If
How
you want,
dare
if
he
you want to
do
make a
that?
joke, you can make a joke. We all need levity in these times.
Right.
A task force briefing on the coronavirus, not the place.
No.
So is that more ridiculous, given the backdrop, or the two asshats, Chris Cuomo, Fredo, and his brother Andrew? Remember they did this routine last week?
Let me ask you something. With all of this adulation that you're getting for doing your job, are you thinking about running for president? Tell the audience. No. No. No, you won't answer?
No, I answered. The answer is no. I
No,
answered
you're
the
not
question.
thinking about it?
Sometimes it's one word. I said no.
Have
No.
you thought about it?
No.
Are you open to thinking about it?
No.
Might you think about it at some point?
No.
How can you know what you might think about at some point right now?
Because I know what I might think about and what I won't think about. But you're a great interviewer, by the way.
Appreciate it. Learn from the best.
These two, honestly, and with all of the plaudits that Andrew Cuomo is receiving, this lame Rowan and Martin routine they're doing, well, they picked it up again yesterday on the occasion of Bernie Sanders dropping out.
Bernie Sanders is out. The word is that this increases the chances with Senator Sanders out that you may get it in the race for president. Is that true?
Is that the word? Well, then it must be true.
That's
It's
the word on the street.
Right?
Is that?
Oh, the
is
word
that
on
a
the
yes?
street?
I'm sorry,
Well,
I
then
didn't
it's
hear an
true.
answer. Was it responsive? You're not responsive.
I'm just saying, if that's the word, who am I to argue with the word, right?
So then
yeah.
the senator
Let's
leaving
see.
the race
What?
has changed your thinking. Is that what you're saying, Governor?
Has the senators leaving the race changed my thinking? In what way?
Are you now giving different consideration to running for president?
No.
The rhetorical rat-tailing, tell me that you don't want to punch both of them in the face.
Well, then there was this thing too when he had coronavirus. He had a dream. He said, "You came to me in a pink tutu and told me everything was going to be okay and to wave my wand." These two are just.
Yeah, America's falling in love with the Cuomo brothers is apparently what they think. We'll ask Roger Kimball what he thinks, editor of the new Criterion. Roger, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure, guys. My pleasure.
What about that Tiger King pardon? What do you think?
I think the country has more important things to think about, and I agree with you when you say that perhaps it's a legitimate question at some point in some circumstance, but certainly not at a press briefing dedicated to explaining to the American people what the government is doing about its handling of the coronavirus.
Yeah, I would say so.
It's the media in those press briefings has, if possible, it's hard to say that it is possible because they've been such clownish people for so long. But I think that they have utterly destroyed what small shreds of integrity they had going into this event. I mean, they look ridiculous. These sort of pseudo gotcha questions that have nothing to do with the subject under discussion. There's actually an amusing little video making the rounds of a woman pretending to ask the president questions, and it's just one insinuation after the next. Wasn't that racist, Mr. President? Didn't you do a terrible job, Mr. President? Didn't you get everything wrong from the very beginning, and so on? And it's the whole White House press corps, I think, has a large bit of egg on its collective countenance.
You wouldn't know it to hear them, and then to watch them to do it day after day. But I understand. I understand what you're saying. I just it's either a complete lack of self-awareness, or they will endure any ridicule and defile themselves in any fashion that's required if they think it's advancing their ultimate goal of defeating Trump in November. That seems obvious.
Yes, I mean, I think that from the very beginning, the media reaction to this was, my gosh, we finally got a way of weaponizing a crisis against the president. Their concern was never about the health issue, however large or small that may ultimately prove to be. It was always, how can we use this as part of our anti-Trump agenda? So at the very beginning, of course, when Congress was busy in their comical effort to impeach the president, they claimed that he was wildly overreacting and was exhibiting his accustomed xenophobia and racism when he closed down flights from China. Of course, as Tom Cotton pointed out, it was probably the most significant single action that the president did early on to slow the growth of infections from the virus. And now, of course, they, turning on a dime, they said, oh, well, now he's not doing enough. He's not being sufficiently draconian. Please take all of our freedoms away. Put everyone under house arrest. I see just this morning, some places they've enacted a law to enable local authorities to fine people up to $1,000 if they're deemed not to be practicing social distancing. Of course, the 15 or so people on the stage were standing right next to one another. So it's the real crisis in this COVID episode is, bad though the disease can be, for if you get it, it can be very bad. There's no question about that. But the real crisis is what it has done to our economy, first of all, and secondly, what has it done to the kind of the texture of our civic liberties, the alacrity with which people were willing and eager to abandon their basic individual freedoms. It should be, very alarming.
Well, the freedom of movement, freedom to assemble, freedom of religion. I feel, Easter's Sunday, and I know a lot of people that are going to go to church, and there might be some confrontations because people don't want them to gather, and they might give us a fine. But I know that I'm going to sit on the lawn of the church and separate myself 6 feet, because if I can go to a grocery store and everyone's in my space, in my face, I can certainly sit on the front lawn of my church and watch the the podcast of it or whatever.
Yeah, good for you. Now it's it's quite clear. It's becoming clearer daily now as the numbers begin to stabilize and many places to decline. That this was again to a very large extent a manufactured crisis. Yes, there are a few hot spots, including New York, near where I live. For special reasons. There's a very dense population, a lot of people from China who have just come from there, living in close proximity to one another. There are a lot of reasons, but it's the idea that this is somehow comparable to the bubonic plague or the Spanish flu is utterly ridiculous. There's a great deal of scaremongering and illegitimate hyping of the real health dangers But when the larger issue is, what this has done to the U.S. economy, people say, oh, we should care more for lives, not the economy, not the stock market. They don't realize that it's not a matter of lives versus the economy. It's a matter of lives versus lives. When you strip $5 or $6 trillion from the economy and throw 10 million people out of work, that has a huge human toll. That you will see spikes in suicide and drug abuse and all sorts of things. So it's this is when this is all said and done and over with, it will be very interesting to go back and watch the evolution of this panic. It really deserves to be an addendum to Charles Mackay's classic book, Extraordinary Delusions and the Madness of Crowds.
Yeah, but I don't think Democratic governors are going to stop until President Trump is out of office. Because look at our governor. Yesterday he called for 12,000 body bags. And I mean, just this from what? Why are you asking for that?
Yeah.
The numbers aren't
there. Just this morning I was reading somewhere hospitals are themselves in a panic, not because they're overburdened with COVID patients. Quite the contrary. They geared up for this huge influx, and in most places, the overwhelming majority, they're empty, and they have a month or only weeks of cash. Their traffic for all sorts of other things has dropped by 30, 40, 50%. It is a healthcare crisis, but not for the reasons people think. It's because people are not going in for their hip replacement. They're not going in for their CAT scan. Yeah.
People want elective surgeries. Orthopedic surgeons are just waiting, and their patients are calling them saying, "Please, I've got it. Please do the surgery," and they can't. But yet, in certain states, they can perform abortions. It makes no sense.
Yeah. No, it's a bad situation.
I want something else that's going on here, and you saw this play out yesterday with Dr. Tedros from the World Health Organization weighing in on possible America defunding. And that is the fight for survival and the hold on status by institutional men, to borrow from Red in Shawshank Redemption. Robert Zoellick, former World Bank president, gives a good example of what I'm talking about in the Wall Street Journal, where he talks about the world watching how America handles the coronavirus, the need for international relationship, talking about how the Federal Reserve has stepped up and the World Bank has stepped up and the WHO has stepped up, and IMF has stepped up, and we need to make sure that we're working collaboratively beyond transactionally with friends and sometime adversaries alike in a global effort, like the Gates Foundation is, and so on and so forth. It's just it's almost like a checklist of making sure I mention every global institution, whether it is philanthropic with an eye towards world institutions like the Gates Foundation, or it's actually those publicly financed publicly financed global institutions. And I wonder, you talked about the media and where their standing is. Where do you think the standing is in the West of the WHO and the UN and these other international bodies at this point?
Well, the WHO is a wholly owned subsidiary of the Chinese Communist Party. I mean, that's pretty clear. Their advice during the course of this health crisis has been maliciously laughable. They just look at how they behave about Taiwan. There's this chap you mentioned was interviewed by someone recently. And he just cut off the interview when she mentioned Taiwan.
Right.
It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. So all of these internationalist, globalist entities, they are part of the administrative, this transnational progressive administrative state. And the reason that Donald Trump was elected in the first place was because he stood athwart that administrative state and said, no, we want America first. We want borders. We need to take care of ourselves first, which doesn't mean America first does not mean America alone, as he put it. Sure, we want to collaborate with people and so on, but why should we be governed by this transnational progressive elite? I mean, Bill Gates may be pretty good at computers, but what gives him the authority to suggest that, well, we won't be able to go back to normal life for 18 months? I mean, why should anyone pay any attention to what Bill Gates has to say about this? It's like paying attention to Barbara Streisand for her political opinions. You might think she's a good singer, but that doesn't make her a political, prophet. It's just ridiculous. And again, a possible silver lining from this episode might be to render the public a little more skeptical about the authority of some of these internationalist organizations. I mean, the UN, you mentioned the UN. I try not to leave any occasion when I can say something negative about the UN. I don't like to let it pass. But I mean, that's it's clearly a nest of spies in New York. If I think it should have been dealt with, screws at the bottom of it, so we could push it out into the East River and float it over to Brussels, where it belongs. It's a huge, complex, anti-American establishment whose only purpose is to engorge its members at our expense.
It's really that's a good way to put it. I'm used to watching people fund their enemies, but it's usually Illinois Republicans funding Democrats, and basically what we've done in America now is just scale that model and funding our enemies. That is an odd thing to do, isn't it? Roger Kimball, editor of the new Criterion. Check out his most recent piece at amgreatness.com, The Coronavirus Crisis in Retrospect, which I'll tweet out. Roger, thanks for joining us as always. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
You're listening to Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Signature Bank is Chicago's fastest growing independently owned business bank. It's a bank where relationships still matter. Signature Bank knows your name and your story. I'm Dan Proft, and I know this because Signature Bank is my business bank.
I'm Robert Anderson, president of McLaughlin Body Company in the Quad Cities, and a customer of Signature Bank. When our 100-year-old family-owned manufacturing company was looking for a new bank, we found an excellent partner with Signature Bank. Signature Bank understands the challenges with manufacturing in today's highly competitive environment. We recently participated in the New Markets Tax Credit Program and were fortunate to have the experts at Signature Bank help us navigate the complexities of this program. With Signature Bank's support, we were able to expand not only our facility, but ultimately our business. If you're looking for a trusted banking partner for your business, look to Chicago's own Signature Bank.
Signature Bank is